Welcome to Seekers and Finders, the podcast where we explore the infinite pathways to truth, creativity, and connection. Our guest today is Stephen Martyn, artist, farmer, teacher, and visionary. With over 30 years living in deep co-creation with the earth, Stephen's life is a living prayer to the wisdom of the land. From founding Toronto's first green landscaping company to co-creating the Sacred Gardener Earth Wisdom School, Stephen's journey weaves traditional plant use, sacred agriculture, and a soul-given purpose to reawaken our relationship with the Great Mother. His new book is GNOSIS, and he says, "In Gnosis we enter a silence so deep and still, space is created for the animate world around us to step up and tell us their story. How they birthed us, protected us, nurtured us, and continued to do so. Our culture came about from our divine marriages to beings from other dimensions, from fire to the materials of our arts like agriculture, healing, ceramics, weaving, writing, and mathematics. The origins of everything in our culture is sacred. The hope is that by getting back to these foundation stones of our culture, we can rebuild a sacred reality once again as our ancestors did."
I don't get far away from here. I'm very intentionally with all my teachings and everything, there's a physical aspect to it. I want people to be able to see it in reality, and that is the challenge to teach metaphysical things, is you can't see them. So then we need good metaphors, and why not go further than metaphors? Why not go for the living embodiment of this wisdom that's coming from the earth, been born into this co-creation, this bit of culture, and still surrounding us, but we're missing it. We've forgot about all these things, right? So that's what I always feel in the school, and people have said, that I'm reminding them of stuff more than teaching them. I'm just reminding stuff that you already know. That's why it resonates so well. We're all so powerful. That's the thing that we're missing, is we all think we're insignificant, but in fact, every thought, every action has this spell coming out of it. It's so much more than we think. Like, that's how I start the book, and it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around, that everything we do is so much more than we think we're doing. It's all loaded, So to be conscious of those things and then tweak them a bit, that's a spell.
Stephen Martyn, welcome to our show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
I know you've done several podcasts and you have a wonderful reputation, but for our viewers who may not know who you are, why don't you give us an introduction to your life? And more interestingly, you talk about on your website about leaving your body at 19 years old and coming back with this wonderful revelation. Can you also talk about that? And then we'll talk about the new book.
Sure. I was looking for answers. I was searching, and that involved transcendental meditation, which my dad brought me into, which was quite a gift when I was 17. And it involved using psychedelics. And in one particular instance, it seemed like I kind of left my life behind. I saw that it hadn't added up to too much at that point, and just kind of let it all go. And in a sense, that was kind of the start. It's not like there's these terms like walk-ins and things like that, where people die and another spirit comes into them or something like that. It wasn't like that, but it was kind of like that. which was to say there was a part of me that did die on the hillside that day. And there was some other part of me that woke up, but was completely lost in our culture. It had no orientation. It had nothing to, no North Star, nothing to guide that part of myself. And also, like a lot of folks, um, you know, because of the spiritual impoverishment of our own culture, we look to the East. And I look to the East, I look to Buddhism, and I found a guiding point there, and that was kind of the start of my journey. But to kind of cut to the quick, I suppose after a number of years, I had a lot more interactions with First Nations people, and I started to see a difference between, say, something like Buddhism or Hinduism and First Nations beliefs. And it had to do with transcending. And I suddenly kind of felt that I couldn't fully embrace this idea of transcendence because I saw another perspective coming from the First Nations people, which was more like insentence. It was more like accepting everything as spirit, as holy, as a container of the holy. And so it's not through transcending physical reality that we achieve something, it's through ascending into it. And then this is where the idea of co-creation comes from, because when you get into that ascendant space, things speak to you. They have their say in the conversation. It's not just like your plans and your structures. You're drawing from the beings that are surrounding us. And so that's kind of how the agriculture and the herbal healing and the tea company and all these different things came about in my life. Was it feels like that's the most urgent thing to me, is to be healthy, to be healed, by these divine beings, these plants that surround us. So in a sense, I've spent 40 years kind of teaching that, focusing on that and practicing that. And I've, kind of, I guess through the school, shifted to maybe what might be seen as metaphysical as opposed to physical. Again, I think it's all like this. So I think it's just us making the separations, but it's helpful to talk about it sometimes. Just to say, I think the metaphysical stuff is a harder platform to stand on, especially when you're not standing on anyone else's, shoulders, or whatever the expression might be. Like, I don't come from any tradition. And as a white guy, like these days, talking about earth spirituality, boy, you're walking right into the line of fire. Like, it's pretty intense these days. But of course, we're spiritual beings too. Like, it's ridiculous. And of course, we all lived this way for literally hundreds of thousands of years, at one with our mother and with the spirits of the earth and with all these things. So, you know, we have to step back into it. And I guess, a few people have said to me, well, like for First Nations teachings, it should be like First Nations people that are passing those things on. And in theory, I agree. That'd be great if we had a fluency around these things. But maybe in reality, we need bridges in our life. And so, yeah, if you meet some traditional guy, like Beautiful Painted Arrow, somebody like that, from New Mexico, he's lived as a Zuni, he's protected by his grandparents from the residential schools, he's lived a traditional, good indigenous life his whole life. And you're learning things from him, and you're like, like, I could never be this person. But I'm from the suburbs of Toronto. I come from total spiritual impoverishment, right? So I think I offer people something of a bridge, like, oh, well, if that guy can do it, then maybe I could do that too, you know?
I want you to carry on this conversation about the book uh, regarding, let's start, I guess we start with the spells that you talk about. Can you get us into that and give us a whole deep dive into the book of Gnosis?
Sure. So again, I think, just as a kind of a general overview, when you're talking about this book, you have to be, again, looking back at the impoverishment of our culture and the hunger for spirituality, that I had, that you had, Gary had, that tons of us have this hunger. And it's because we've been starved, you know, um, through, through the Judeo Christian religion, through industry, through science, we've been completely separated from this kind of earth centric spirituality. So we have this crazy hunger for it. And then maybe starting, 50, 70 years ago at the most, uh, we look to other cultures for that. And we think that's a sacred culture, that's sacred, but we're kind of not. We're like somehow corrupt. And then if you look around us at our culture, at the economy, at the ecology, it's not looking so good. Everything's going down, right, in a big way. And maybe it's for the best. Maybe the quicker the better, because it's going to have to go down to a certain point before the light starts to come back through, right? And accepting that kind of darkness and kind of admitting, acknowledging this impoverishment that we have, is the very start. And so, in a sense, like I've been working with this for whatever, 4 decades and trying to figure out what is sacred about our culture. So that's kind of at the foundational idea of the book. And then again, when you can let go of all that other stuff, all those other layers, then what is around us rises up. So this thing that we're sitting on with the 4 legs, you know, this is a sacred object. It was only for holy people. It was an indicator that you were a bridge between other spirits and the earth, and that you were somehow held up in the 4 corners, the 4 directions. And then the cuarto, this room that we're in, again with the 4 and these sacred structures that surround us, but we just forgot about all this stuff. And so if you think about spells, like the chair, for example, it has a huge spell. I mean, it's kind of like the cell phone thing now. The chair gives us a sense of superiority. It gives us a sense that we're above things. Yeah? But then the fallout from the spell, because we take it for granted and we abuse these things, is that we get bad knees and we get bad backs and we get bad hips because we're not going all the way down to the earth and getting back up and down and then back up and many, many times a day, because this is the natural way to live and it keeps all your ligaments and joints flexible. So something like a chair is a divine thing, but it can be so easily abused, and so on and so on. And this is true for our clothing, for our houses, for fire, for agriculture. I start right at the start with our first tools and the first, what I call divine marriages, like with the elementals, with fire. And from these, a whole kind of wave of co-creation comes out. And by abusing them, then there's kind of, and forgetting about the marriage, then there's this kind of dark wave that's created that comes in the wake. And so we see this with agriculture, Whereas now people are actually think agriculture is like somehow evil or something. But agriculture is this incredibly divine, sacred ritual. The whole thing was given to us, you know, so that us weak little humans could prosper and relax and survive and maybe honor the spirits that gave it to us. But then what do? You know, we forget the divine origins of it. We forget that things like corn and wheat, they're holy beings that we married. We should be bowing down to these ones. We should have altars to them, right? But instead, we start manipulating and manipulating and manipulating, all for our good, always for our good, not for the earth, not for the other animals, but just for us, just for us. And then we've turned it into this really toxic thing that's killing us all, killing the earth. So we do it over and over again, and we do it with like religion, we do it with philosophies, you know, think of something like communism or something. The basic ideas that Marx had were fucking brilliant. It became the dogma of it, and in its application that it got lost. And over again, like Peter Kingsley just wrote this book a few years ago about Jung, and he talked about how that was supposed to be a religion that would save us, and it could have. But what we do? We fucked it up. We turned it into dogma and into science, and we kind of lost the what it could have been for us, you know. So I just see this over and over again, and most recently, I see it with the whole semiotics and feminist analysis of the culture has turned into this crazy political correctness where nobody can say anything and do anything, and people are canceled like left, right, and center. But the original ideas of feminism and semiotics were fucking brilliant, and they helped call out prejudice and change the culture. So again, it's this thing, this pattern I see us just doing over and over again.
What can you teach us and at the same time make it so that it's not that esoteric and everybody can grasp what you're saying and just have a holy shit moment, this guy is right, you know?
Hmm. Well, I mean, it can be everything from the smallest things in our life, like food and water. I mean, to bless your water, to recognize it as a holy thing, you know, and your food and just all these different aspects. But in the school, I guess to answer that question, that first question, which is a good one, which is, are there things that we can do because we're so far down the line? How do we get to a place where we can do something that's clean enough and pure enough, for lack of a better word, that it will, you know, be like a spring, and that those kind of the ancestral wisdom and those ancestral connections will come back through. And so it's a dance, right? Because lots of people who start learning First Nations skills, for example, become extremely fundamental about it. And most of us have all been through this fundamental phase. Most of us, at one point or another, you had to cut everything off that, you know, connected us to the muddle of our culture, and be very fundamental about being into other stuff, whether it was food or religion or whatever. Most of us have gone down that route, and it's necessary. It's like a teenager rejecting their parents or something. There has to be a time where you do that. You push them away to gain your own identity. It's a necessary part of things. So that's kind of part of this. And then when I'm thinking about these acts, to not get caught in the dogma, not get caught in the fundamentalism, but think about the actual essence of the thing. So if it's something like agriculture, to try doing it by hand, do it all by hand. Use a heavy hoe to break the sod up, save your own seed, make your own compost, be connected to every element of it, and make that into a holy thing. See it as a holy thing. Give it meaning. And of course, agriculture is a really good one to do it with. People have been using that as a metaphor since Vedic, writing since very early, 4,000 years. We've been using agriculture. It's the metaphor in a way because it so represents this union with spirit, or that's what it was supposed to represent. Now, of course, in the old Judaic texts, they twisted that all around, and all the sacred symbols, right? The tree, the woman, the serpent, all of these sacred symbols got turned into propaganda to turn against us. And rather than it recognized as a holy thing, we talked about it being a curse. Like, you're going to have to do this forever, work by the sweat of your brow, and blah, blah, blah. I love sweating. I love being out in the field. There's nothing more holy than that for me. Feeling your body, feeling the weight of the hoe, feeling the ground, feeling the purpose of what you're doing. That's what we're here for, man. And that biblical story took that away from us. It said, oh no, you're out of the garden. You fucked up. You're done, Actually, you didn't even fuck up. She fucked up, right? Which is classic. Like she'd fuck up, right? It was us for sure.
That damn apple started it all, man.
Well, and the apple is just such a profound thing, right? Because the apple represents agriculture. It represents co-creation, and it evolved out of cultures that embraced the goddess. So that was the tree of knowledge that we're like not supposed to know about that. You're not supposed to touch that. Don't go there, But of course we did. And it was for the best, right? Like, and of course there's positive, teachings that I believe about that too, in terms of us being more self-conscious and that kind of thing, that story also represents. But just to say, so many of our foundational stories are propaganda. And until you start to take them apart, again, in that semiotic way, looking at them and kind of really dismantling them and going, okay, they got that from this whole thing, the whole goddess culture thing, and they're trying to twist it around as it comes into patriarchy to hold power. They don't want women going to the forest and doing these pagan type ceremonies, They want them in line with that religion, which, and arguably, you talked about war, and I know people will be offended by this, but whatever, I'm just saying what's fact. Yahweh was one of a pantheon of gods, and he is a war god, and he feeds by blood. And so the whole thing of circumcision and everything is to feed Yahweh. And arguably, a lot of these wars that have happened, Yahweh might be thriving from all the blood. And it perpetuates, right? As you know, war's like a trauma. And so once it happens once, it's like the waters have been poisoned in a sense, and there's revenge, and then it goes on and on and on, and it's still going on, like you said, and it's been a huge distraction. And this is another thing I talk about in the book that a lot of people don't know about, is war. This kind of genocidal war is a new thing for humanity. It's only been around like 4,000 years or something. Maria Gambutes did all these discoveries, cultures that were 20, 30,000 years old that were able to smelt metal, but the blade had no significance in the culture. None of the people died through injury, none of that. So we think that we're a warring people because of the last 4,000 years. But if you look at the last 400,000 years, not so, not so. This is a later stage of our, you could say, decline or corruption in a sense. And of course, all these things have to play themselves through, because again, the only way that the poison can come out is through the deeper infection kind of welling up and then coming out on the surface. And that's what's happening now, right? It's all
Yeah.
just kind of falling apart because it has to.
Well, I mean, you've got this small little agricultural center. You have people come up there, but I know you've done talks and you've written books. How do you spread this thing out? What are you feeling that's happening now? Because people are definitely becoming more spiritual. So they are seeing the light in
Mm.
some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And how do you, I mean, you must get frustrated, but yet you've got your family around you, your plants, your partner, your trees, your animals, and they, I'm sure, bring you solace. Um, what do you say to that? You know, how do you make it a bigger thing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. And I probably I'm not the person to ask because I don't know, like uh I guess I do what I do because I'm kind of being told what to do in a sense by my superiors, we'll say, my elders, the ones who are watching over me tell me what to do. So I do what I do. And then whether or not it kind of makes any splash or waves or anything, it feels like that's totally out of my control and not my department at all. So, like, I mean, I wrote this book called The Roundhouse about this cob stack wall earthship that I built, and just from materials on the land, and just like my whole shtick. But it was about building in particular, and it never occurred to me that maybe not many people would buy a book about how to build some bizarre house that you could never get insurance for, or like it's actually such an obscure thing that I did, but it didn't even occur to me that it wouldn't really interest people. So the book did terribly because how many people are actually interested in doing something like that? Once I had a friend up, um, he's called Laughing Boy, and he's a drummer. He did a lot of drum workshops and stuff. And we had this whole idea about going into the forest, and we would make instruments with things we'd find, and that would be the workshop. And then we'd have a big forest jam over distances at the end of it. And we were like, this is like the most amazing idea or whatever. Not one person shy signed up for the workshop. And we just laughed our heads off about it because we thought that was like the best idea ever. But like maybe something like that would fly now. It was 20 years ago. So it's all like timing and stuff that doesn't really have to do with you, whether the word gets out. And I can only hope that you're right and that somehow this book Gnosis just will fall into that kind of acceptable public stream. And it is a good read. I think it's a pretty easy read in a sense. Like it's conversational. I'm not an academic. It's all just right out of my heart and right out of my head. And I think it, it's the real deal. So
How do you relate the sound to the work you're doing with the plants? And they must respond. I mean, is there something more that they respond to and less that they don't want to hear? Or how does that work?
well, I mean, I think sounds so interesting because it's like a vehicle, right? There's stuff inside the sound, you know? And so even when you're just speaking, right, there's layers and layers of stuff in there. I had this woman, she actually did a couple rounds of the school, but during one of our, circles and maybe an introductory thing, she said, "Oh, I've listened to Stephen's podcast over 100 times." And there was this kind of like, people just kind of went, "Well, he got like a stalker here in the room or something like that." Like there was this kind of funny energy. But then she said, "No, I'm not even listening to him. I just close my eyes and his voice becomes this vehicle for me. So it's like a meditation tool." you know? And I was like, okay, and that was the first time somebody had said that so clearly. Because I mean, I do these talks, and when I'm teaching, I see people often just close their eyes and they put their head back and they're clearly just with me, they're just journeying with me. So I think even just our voice is so magical. And again, we talk all the time and we hear stuff all the time. So it kind of diminishes the real power of the voice.
But your
Somehow,
voice, your voice is in uh, a timbre that can bring you into another space. It's not harsh. It's got a lilt to it. It's got a certain uh, sweetness about it that I can see where people would just sit back and just listen to you.
right.
So what about the spells now? I mean, when you go out there, can you give us some idea how these spells work, what the spells are? Can you give us some spells?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of thanks for bringing me back because in a sense, it's picking up where I left off. So in the school, in a sense, I'm presenting these kind of tools and fundamental arts, whether it's weaving or pottery, agriculture. It kind of depends on what's going on the farm and what time of year it is. I just do what I would normally be doing, but I do it with 20 people, essentially. We walk you through. So the spell, I mean, almost by definition, with spells, A plus B doesn't equal C. There's more layers to it. Anything that's a spell is somehow like a little holographic piece of something bigger. So, yeah, in terms of my actual carbon footprint that I might be saving, or in terms of the earth or the plants that I'm working with, I'm just this super little speck of nothing. And maybe I've taught, a few dozen people or more how to do things my way, but even that is a speck. But then if you start thinking about this idea of spells and people doing things a certain way that has a resonance, so it's not so much a sound, but the actions themselves all have integrity and resonance. And it kind of comes through you first, I imagine, or this is my experience of it, is when you're doing something like making a furrow or planting a seed or grafting fruit trees, there's this kind of wave that comes through you that you can feel. It goes way back, like the ancestors are all smiling way back, and they're looking down on you in a good way. And you can kind of feel that. So I'd have to say that's where the spell starts. It's between you and these spirits that gave you and carried these gifts for you. And then you're finally doing them again. And then so there's that whole thing. Oh, and that just brought together this lovely story, but I'm going to just carry on for this for a sec. We'll see if we can make it back there. So it's a subtle thing. And the only thing I can say is that the effect on people's lives is profound. I don't think anyone's got through the school unscathed. Like, which is to say, it's going to change you. I'm going to pull you into the depths of all these things, and you may not be with me at all. And I don't care at this point. I'm secure enough. It's not a problem whether you're with me or not. I'm seeding things into you, and I'm seeding in the deep experience of this thing, and I'm telling you how to tend for it, tend to it. And whether you do it or not, it's up to you. I'm not a guru. I'm not like hovering over you and making sure you do it the right way. I think our time for that stuff is past. So I'm giving you the option, and I'm exemplifying it myself. That's the main thing, right? Is I have to do it, and then I show you, and then I explain it, which that's the big difference is I between my regular day to day and my school days is I explain stuff a lot. Whereas normally I'm just doing it, working, do the ceremony, feel what I feel, act on it, and so on and so on, you know.
Well,
So
I'm sorry, you're sharing from your experience. You're not
that's
trying
it.
to be the overlord of this whole instruction part. You've just learned this thing, and you're casting it out. I mean, they say you're casting a spell, but you are casting a spell. You're throwing it out and hoping that those can feel the resonance of it and utilize it for their own benefits. Is that correct?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and just like feeling that thing, the little story there that I popped into head was last year I had a First Nations class, so I was teaching them about the plants because the folks in this area were moved off their land for 150 years before they were brought here and stuck on a reservation. So they lost the connection with the plants. They don't know anything about the plants. So I'm teaching them about the plants. And last spring, we were in the forest, small class, couple elders, couple young people, couple other people, and they had never harvested wild ramps or leeks. Now, it's their ancestors that brought the leeks to this area from like upstate New York and Maine and places like that. They never existed here. They're not indigenous, the plant to this area. So when we were harvesting those, the whole forest started to kind of I don't know how to say it other than like was filled with their ancestors all like crying or something because it was incredibly profound. And so this was something another culture that I was honored to be hosting for this experience, but it's just an extreme example of what we can all experience, just even with the foods that we eat, because we did have profound divine connections with all of these foods at some point. And one of the things I keep pointing out to people is we haven't created any new foods
Mm.
in this time of war. That all came from a time period where it was goddess cultures. It was cultures, people were animists, and they were working with the plants in a way that we can't even conceive now to end up with the foods that we ended up with. But we still don't even know the origins of like the apple, for example, or the pear, or wheat, or corn. I mean, maybe corn because of First Nations people, we have the stories, but all our stories were lost. And they were lost through this rolling colonization. Because if I conquer your culture and I take, say, your primary food and it's something like a potato or something like that, this amazing thing, I might kill off all your people, but I'm definitely going to take your food. I'm not going to tell your story about that, your origin story, because that would be holding you up probably in the story. So that's why we don't know the sacred stories of any of our food, is because of this rolling colonization. So we didn't come up with any of these foods. We don't hold the stories, but amazingly, we were able to come to this other continent where people still had their original stories from like 9,000 years ago, you know? And then it all kind of lines up to a certain degree with our more recent kind of genetic stuff. And then suddenly, people were talking about corn being 2 to 4,000 years old or something when I first started my academic kind of career or whatever 30, 40 years ago. And now it was 7,000. Now they're like, oh, it's 9,000. It's like, okay, are you sure about that? Because you seem to change your mind quite a bit about these things. And this is true over and over again. This book called A New History of Everything, it's called. The upshoot of the book is that agriculture started 20, 40,000 years ago, long, long before we think it did, before the Neolithic, in fact, and that it was just a matter of when cultures took it on in a big way. And what they argue is that um, we have this association with patriarchy and like these hierarchical societies and agriculture as though they're synonymous, but in fact, they're not at all. That many, many cultures have taken on agriculture and then actually backed away from it. So, First Nations cultures, Central American cultures, all these massive city structures, the temples are the parts we still know about. The reason the people backed away from them is because it failed as an experiment. That these cultures tried to make these huge hierarchical societies and they completely failed. And so they went, okay, let's disband. And so the mound culture, all these different cultures in the States, even um, dissipated out onto the land again, and rather than the central city state. So the hope, I think, of their book there is that in some way we might do the same thing, that we might disband or at least alter these incredibly consumptive cities that are essentially eating the land. If you're living on the land, you take care of it, right? I'm not going to clear cut my own forest. I'm not going to use chemicals in my own gardens because it's my health and my children's health and stuff. And so I think the movement back to a bit more of a rural existence, a small town existence, this kind of thing, it has to be part of what we do. It has to be.
Well, you said when you had this, the First Nation people that forgot about how to grow, and but it was such a profound experience. Did they feel their ancestors behind them? Did they have that experience that you naturally have because you can feel them?
Definitely. Like that was the really amazing thing about that class is like, with the classes that I teach, with it's majority kind of Western culture, white people in my classes. There's a bit of a mixture in there, which is lovely. But just to say, when I'm teaching those folks and it's time to do some prayers or something, I have to say, okay, be quiet, pay attention. I'm going to do a prayer kind of thing. With these people, I never had to do that. As soon as I'd start to do it, they would all just shut up and just feel that space. So this is the interesting thing is they're disconnected in some ways, but they're still connected in other ways. They really are. And incredible generosity, these folks who live down the road from me here, like it it's still in their culture, that level of generosity where if you can make somebody happy by giving them something, you'll just do it, even if it's the shirt off your back, you know? Like it's so alien to us, this idea of not thinking for ourselves, but thinking for the people, thinking for the culture, you know? And we see this in older culture, in, traditional Asian cultures as well, where everything is the family and the culture. It's not about you at all. But we have this cult of the individual, right? And that's kind of another thing that has to be broken down is to realize it's not about you. you
Well,
know?
thinking for the larger culture for is actually more beneficial because you're
Oh,
actually building up a support
entirely.
system that will inevitably help you in the long run. I mean, you don't want to be a solitary soldier where, you're the only one that's taking care of your situation. Now,
Yeah.
with that said,
Yep.
I'm curious about, and I'm sure you discussed this at your schooling. Pharmaceuticals have been created to give the body healing, but we know that food is our fuel. That's the reason it's there. I mean, it's obvious that we landed here and we were given food to fuel our bodies, and that would probably be the most natural way to heal whatever is wrong with us.
Yep.
Even though some viruses and bacteria have probably accumulated over the thousands and thousands of years. But at the same time, I'm sure there are plants that have also come out to fight those. So how do you, what's your whole take on that as far as food and healing?
Well, yeah, food is medicine for sure. And, with something, say, like wild leeks, like wild ramps that was just mentioned, I mean, there's so many health benefits. It's just like garlic, right? So it's antibacterial, it's for your circulation, it's for your heart, like all these incredible things. And that's just food. And then in any given area, anywhere I've been in the world, but here, and this is a pretty harsh climate I live in, but there's probably 100 healing plants that I know just on this property. And they can be accessed any time of year because there's trees as well as seasonal plants. So like the whole idea of pharmaceuticals and that is an industrial idea. There was never any need for it. I don't see one upside to it for the earth, for us. No, it's totally industry based, which I think has become clearer and clearer that that's what it's about.
Profit
And
based.
oh, totally, totally. And unbelievable. Oh my God. During this last whole thing with the freaking COVID, they took the world over. I mean, literally, like a lot of people were, more or less not connected with that industry, didn't support it. But man, they got just about everybody on that whole wave. And entirely debatable whether it was a good thing or not. So I don't know. Like for me, the medical industry is just trouble, and it's really, I think, revealing itself more and more its true roots. Like I think when we were growing up, say in the 60s and 70s and stuff, we believed in it. And it actually seemed to work too, like antibiotics and stuff. Now, maybe it's the abuse of the antibiotics and maybe the pathogens and all the environmental toxins and all that stuff are just getting so much worse that it's not effective. And I mean, I'm a herbalist, and everybody I see has gone and seen a doctor and come to the end of that process before they see me. And I don't think there's maybe one or two people in the last 10 years who I haven't been able to help, you know. So either cure or get healthy as much as they can, for their condition.
My next question is, um, there must be a plant or a food source that alleviates certain things in the body, stress, for example, hypertension. I'm curious about uh, people that make a lot of mucus because it seems that with COVID, that was
Mm.
the main thing that happened. All this mucus was formed. It went into the lungs. It created a breathing situation. And I know myself personally, I'm, of that ilk. I do make more than I probably should. Perhaps it's because of the foods that I'm eating that are
Mhm.
not all natural. But is there a plant that can help alleviate overabundance of mucus? I'm putting you on the spot now, Stephen.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And, I'm going to give you a nice complicated answer. So I guess the thing is that mucus is like a symptom of something else going on. And generally with herbs, it's not a kind of a treating the symptom thing. It's you're going after the cause of the thing. So the cause of the thing is that the mucus is trying to protect you. So there's a couple factors. There's the deterioration of the endothelial. So these are the cells that line all our guts and line everything. And because of that deterioration, people are having crazy amounts of food allergy because the proteins and stuff from our food is bleeding right into our bloodstream directly. Right. And so your guts are like, oh, this is terrible. Create mucus, because there's supposed to be a mucus layer covering the endothelial. It's part of that whole separation, right? So because of the deterioration of the one thing, your body's going, more mucus, more mucus. We have to protect ourselves. And so I guess the question is, how do you rebuild the endothelial? And it's a big question, because it's things like the glyphosades that are prevalent everywhere now on the planet that's deteriorating the endothelial. So this kind of makes sense in terms of a doctrine of signature. Mucus like foods are the best thing for the endothelial, or herbs. So something like slippery elm, for example. Now, slippery elm has been this well-known plant to help with people who have chronic disease, people who have chronic gastrointestinal stuff. Like, it's an incredible, incredible plant. You mix it up in water, it's the bark, and it turns into a solid slime in about a minute or two. So you mix it up and then you knock it back before it regels. So that would be an example of one plant that would help your body with this problem of the deterioration, and then you'd stop generating so much mucus because you wouldn't have to. Your body would be like, okay. And that also helps with huge amounts of gastrointestinal problems, including IBS and things like that, that are all related to this deterioration of the endothelial.
Oh, we'll
How's
talk after this podcast because you're going to give me a prescription for this. You hit it right on the nail, right on the head.
Well, I see
That's
a lot of
that's
people,
that's funny.
so
I
yeah,
I asked you what I needed to ask you. So
right, okay.
do you have a book with all of these remedies? I mean, I would imagine you would want to talk about this in a book and offer it off to the public.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of herbal books out there, and that's probably why I haven't done it. I haven't written a herbal book. Um, I have a herbalism online course, and some of this stuff is written in that, like a lot of it. I'm doing a in-person course that is also being recorded right now, where we're going through the different body systems. So I just did guts was the first course, and then heart and blood is coming up in a couple weeks, and then nervous system and brain and so on and so on. So I'm kind of going through it rather than teaching the herbs. I'm looking at the ailments, and then hopefully that will attract people who have those ailments, and then they'll be like, okay, I don't have to learn everything about herbalism. I just have to learn, these plants, and they suit me, so
And this is all on your website, so people
yeah.
that are interested can go and take this course now for the first one that's listed there. That's great. So we'll
Yeah,
we'll put a link to your website and anything else you want to give us that you feel
yeah.
is important for people to know. All right.
And I do consultations too, so they can be over the internet. It's fine.
So I want you to go deep now into your soul and tell us what you really feel is going to happen and what your hope is for the future.
Yeah, well, um I mean, I had children, and I did it knowing or feeling or whatever, seeing what's coming, which is to say I have some hope. I wouldn't have had kids if I didn't have hope. And I didn't have kids till I was 44, because I didn't see that hope. It was only when I started to live this way and have such abundance in my own life that I kind of went, okay, I can bring some more people in on this. And of course, they have no interest in what I'm doing. But beside that point, uh, just kind of how it goes, right? But I imagine things will have to get a lot kind of worse, and it's really, really happening quick. Like we're really plummeting. Yeah, I wouldn't really want to hazard a guess as to, when the turnaround will come, but it won't be in our lifetime. It won't be in my lifetime. It won't be in your guys' lifetime, right? Like this whole idea that suddenly everyone's going to wake up and everything's going to be better is not going to happen. We thought maybe it was whatever, the Mayan calendar, what was it? What, 2012 or something, whatever it was supposed to be. But these are fallacies. The only way that it's going to change is to deconstruct this mess that we're in. And there has to be enough pressure, because it's just like us as individuals, right? We don't change until we have to, till we're forced right into it, right? Till things get bad enough that we're like, okay, no more cheese and dairy or whatever it is. So that's just like a superficial example, but same with our life, so many things that we really have to have our nose rubbed in it, it would seem, before we kind of get the message. And so when these terrible things happen, it's just like, bring it on. Like it's only through strife in our own life and this darkness that we learn. And so as a culture, it's going to be the same. And we had such an opportunity, I believe, with the COVID, was an immense opportunity for change and learning, but we missed the boat. But what can you say? We'll get another one. We'll get another chance and another. And they'll keep coming just like they do in our personal life. Custom made for us, right? Yeah.
Teaching tools.
Yeah,
That was
that's
really
it.
beautiful. That was
Yeah.
absolutely perfect. So,
Mhm.
Gary, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions, but I'm certainly glad um, as Stephen mentioned Peter Kingsley, because the Peter Kingsley is my connection, whatever connection I do have with the whole shamanic indigenous cultures. In fact, you mentioned Painted Arrow. Now, I just finished a book by Peter Kingsley, and there was a little
Yeah.
preface by yeah, I don't know if it was
Yeah.
Painted Arrow or not. I have the book
Yep.
upstairs. I just
That's
finished it.
him.
Yeah, that's him. Okay,
It's
and
him.
I thought it might have been, and I also read Catafalque, which was a tremendous,
Yeah. Yeah.
take on the whole Jungian things. So I'm
Yep.
really glad you brought that in, because Peter Kingsley is like really, I would say, a big influence on me, and certainly the way I am kind of shifting, my own. Um, understanding of indigenous cultures, and especially the shamanic aspect of it. So that was really good.
And I also have a Kingsley connection because after reading his book Reality uh, uh, about Parmenides and Empedocles, that shifted my whole spiritual journey into a new position. It actually took me away from the whole, and this was not too long ago, maybe 20 years ago. It took me
Right.
away from the whole guru consciousness, the whole hierarchical consciousness, and gave me a whole new avenue to look at from the standpoint of self-transcendence, your own natural guru living inside of you, the voice that lives inside of you, that I think more people should listen to
Yeah.
instead of the mind trip. There's a depth inside the heart that is really that beautiful natural instinct that tells us exactly what we're supposed to do. So yeah, Peter Kingsley was a big influence on me as well. Um, so where do you go from here? When is your book going to be published? Gnosis.
Yeah, summer solstice, it's available. So June 21st or thereabouts. Um, it's up on Amazon now for pre-sale.
And
And
the title is Gnosis. G
Gnosis,
GNOSIS.
GNSAS. And
Okay.
then growing sacred culture is the byline there.
I'm really still so interested in these spells. Um, do you come up with this spell yourself? I mean, are these words that you create to do the spell? Maybe you can't give us the spell now because we don't want to
Well,
create.
yeah. I mean, this is, I guess, I'm thinking when I'm talking about spells, I mean, I'm talking about it in a broader sense. I don't have like spells per se. What I'm saying is that if you say with water, right? If you can, ideally, if you can go to a spring or something and be getting it, then you lay down a little offering there, you make a prayer of thanks, you feel the purity of the water coming from the aquifer. And again, if you can't go to the place and it's just your tap, you can also still do all this because essentially the water is still pure. It's still a pure thing. It's an elemental, it can't be corrupted. So water is a good one to work with because we all have access to it. And then you're blessing it, you're thanking, and then as you consume it, you're consuming this deeper consciousness of the aquifer. Yeah. And that's the spell, and then suddenly you have a new relationship with water. And we can do that with everything in our life. Like, again, the chair, our house, our clothes, and then everything becomes sacred. So, like, I had a teacher, grandmother Margarita, and she had really good suggestion because she was a Mayan person. Most of us now are not weaving our own clothes. Even I don't do that because there's a lot of free secondhand clothes. I don't buy new clothes, but I'm very environmentally minded. So there is a lot of used clothes around. But she said, you know, you're clothing yourself in the industry. And then often it's petroleum based, right? The fabrics now more and more. What kind of spell is that creating for your life? You're literally entombed in this stuff. So you try to get the best source of material you can get, natural things, cotton, whatever. And cotton's got all sorts of problems, but again, you're consciously trying to get the best you can and something that's good for your body. So natural cloth. And then just do a little bit of an embroidery of like a sacred symbol or something that's representing a story or something like that. And then every time you put that piece of clothing on, then you think of this sacred thing. And so, in a sense, it's breaking the industrial spell and making it more a spiritual, personal connection to these things that everything should be sacred. Like, don't you want everything to be sacred that surrounds us in our life? So you try to make it that way, you know? You bring the meaning to it, you bring the stories to it, and it changes your life, right? And people might go, oh, he's really woo woo or whatever, but like I don't think I am at all. Actually, I think I'm super grounded in this reality. Probably what you're thinking is actually woo woo. Like I don't get far away from here. I'm very intentionally with all my teachings and everything. There's a physical aspect to it. You know, I want people to be able to see it in reality, and that is the challenge to teach metaphysical things is you can't see them. So then we need good metaphors, and why not go further than metaphors? Why not go for the living embodiment of this wisdom that's coming from the earth, been born into this co-creation, this bit of culture, and still surrounding us, but we're missing it. We've forgot about all these things, right? So that's what I always feel in the school. And people have said, that I'm reminding them of stuff more than teaching them. I'm just reminding stuff, that you already know. That's why it resonates so well.
And that makes so much sense. I mean,
Totally.
when you initially talk about spells, and first of all, woo is somebody else's problem, not yours.
Yeah,
That's they've created
that's
that.
what I figured.
But the concept of spells always brings to mind, the three witches
Yeah,
standing around the
yeah,
cauldron, with the broom and casting something that is not good. But
yeah.
each person can create their own spell through their own vibration, and that's what we're talking about here.
And we do it inevitably. We're all so powerful. That's the thing that we're missing, is we all think we're insignificant, but in fact, every thought, every action has this spell coming out of it. It's so much more than we think. Like that's how I start the book, and it's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around, that everything we do is so much more than we think we're doing. It's all loaded, you know? So to be conscious of those things and then tweak them a bit, that's a spell.
So before we leave, I want to go to another thing I'm interested in, and that would be the elementals that you talked about beyond the natural ones in the foods and the waters, but those that live in the forest, um, in a multidimensional state. They are there. I mean, their voices are there. How do you uh, um, work with them? And you must feel some kind of other when you're there.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, always. And it's a crowded field. In truth, we're in a pretty crowded place, even when we're alone. And so just paying attention, and feeling things, and without even thinking about it, acting accordingly is our kind of natural, it's our natural state. But we're all just talking to ourselves all the time so much that you can't ever actually feel or hear any other voices. But there's times where, yeah, so there's a lot of times where I'll see a slight movement and see things out of this, the periphery all the time. And I'm seeing things going on. I don't like, necessarily kind of see a physical thing, but there is physical waves from the thing that I'm seeing. And most often I pay attention to it, but, you know, life is what it is. So, like the other day, for example, um, I have four pretty big gardens, and my shoulder from doing these years of heavy hoeing is starting to kind of deteriorate. So I've arranged for a couple of the gardens um, to get a tiller. So I had this tiller going, and man, I could feel something was wrong, but like this is the problem with our culture over and over again, is you got to get the job done, right? You got to keep going or whatever. I can't just stop in the middle of the day, got 12 hours of work to do, and just kind of ponder on this feeling. So sometimes I still fuck up, is where I'm going here, is that I should have stopped. I should have come inside. I should have got some tobacco or some sage. I should have come back out and just laid it down. It was an area that I hadn't tilled, and in not tilling, I had fostered the beings there. And in tilling, it was destroying their habitat. And I didn't acknowledge it enough. And then the freaking tiller almost exploded and lit on fire, right? This all happened like 5 minutes after I should have stopped. So, like, again, it's degrees to sensitivity, and then, to just feel the right thing at the right time and kind of go, oh, maybe this, I just felt this thing. I pretty much heard them say, you know, you've never tilled here before. What's going on? And I should have stopped, but I didn't. and just to say, yeah, it's just an example, but
Well, that's a perfect story for us to stop our podcast because people will give some thought to that. I want to thank you really. I mean, we've been looking forward to this for a long time, and
nice. Me
I
too.
wish you much success and hope that you can get through the thick heads of society that are, the cheeseburger and, the McDonald's crowd. So thank you, Stephen, and blessings to your garden, your your theory, and everything that you want to bring to us. That's wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you so
very
much,
much.
Gary. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stefan.